News tonight, new controversy in the battle over President Trump's phone call to the widow of a fallen soldier this week.
Yeah, the president's chief of staff took center stage today and said he told the president what to say. KCO9 political reporter Bryan has more on the unexpected appearance by the retired General John Kelly, whose own son died in battle.
That's right, absolutely. And this was the chief of staff to the rescue, to be quite honest with you. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly making it very clear over the years he did not want to talk publicly about his son's death in Afghanistan 7 years ago. But today he jumped into the controversy over President Trump's ill-fated condolence phone call this week as the White House tried to slow down what was becoming a runaway train. It was a moment of rare drama and emotion in the press briefing room as the White House Chief of Staff, General John Kelly, whose own son was killed in Afghanistan in 2010, stood up for President Trump to snuff out the escalating controversy over the president's phone call to a mourning widow.
He called 4 people the other day and expressed his condolences in the best way that he could.
And Kelly perhaps fell on his own sword when he said he guided the commander-in-chief through the condolence calls to the families of the 4 fallen soldiers killed 2 weeks ago in a terrorist ambush in Niger, suggesting he used the same language that was presented to him when his son was killed, the language that started a firestorm of controversy in this case.
He was doing exactly what he wanted to do when he was killed. He knew what he was getting into by joining that 1%.
But the advice backfired when the president's call to Maisha Johnson, the pregnant widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, exploded into controversy after Sergeant Johnson's mother and Congresswoman Frederica Wilson charged President Trump disrespected Sergeant Johnson by saying he knew what he signed up for, which the president denied.
Didn't say what that Congresswoman said. Didn't say it at all. She knows it.
But Congresswoman Wilson says there were 5 other people in the car listening when the president called, and they all heard it too.
I don't have time to go back and forth with the president. I have work to do. He has work to do too.
Ready?
But Kelly blasted the Congresswoman, accusing her of manipulating a private, somber phone call into a political firestorm.
I was stunned when I came to work yesterday morning and brokenhearted at what I saw a member of Congress doing and what she was saying and what she was doing on TV. The only thing I could do to collect my thoughts was to go and walk among the finest men and women on this earth. And you can always find them because they're in Arlington National Cemetery.
However, just as Kelly charged Congresswoman Wilson made this private phone call into a national controversy, it was Mr. Trump who made the whole presidential phone call process into a national controversy when he revealed that General Kelly never received a call from President Obama when his son was killed.
He asked me about previous presidents, and I said I can tell you that President Obama, who was my commander-in-chief when I was on active duty, did not call my family. That was not a criticism. That was just to simply say, I don't believe President Obama called. That's not a negative thing.
If you look at President Obama and other presidents, most of them didn't make calls.
Former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta told CNN statements like that from President Trump when he gets into trouble have consistently created bitter episodes like this one.
He tends to look for scapegoats, and he tries to change the issue. And the first thing he usually does is either go back to President Obama and how he handled it, or other presidents handled it, and tries to raise issues that somehow justify how he handles things.
Well, tonight this is starting to look like a political battle that neither side can win. So at this point, it appears both sides may be ready to end the bitter debate over the phone calls. Right now, it seems to be spreading negative feelings all around, and neither the president nor his critics are apparently gaining much from it. So this may be time for an unofficial truce. Jeff, Lena, back to you.